Are you planning to release albums as well as singles and EPs? Have you ever thought of doing a feedback video as well? Do you plan on releasing sample packs for free or purchase on the label? So I'm assuming it would have cost Behringer more to include MIDI CC. I saw that Korg are remaking the MS-20 again. Hey guys, and welcome to the Kane audio vlog. It's Friday, it's time for another Ask Me Anything. Usual rules apply. Comment anything you want below this video and I'll get back to you in next week's video. Before I look at last week's video, house admin, which I usually make a note. What have I been doing this week? Mostly admin stuff. I've done my taxes. Yeah, I know it's late, but, well, it's not late, but late in the day. What else have I done? Not too much that I can talk about. I've done I had a couple of tracks accepted for Universal for a project there. I'll again talk more about that when it comes out. I've updated the tonal display list, which is on Spotify. I'll put a link below this video as I normally do. I think that is it for this week. I can't think of anything major or pressing. Yeah, so there we go, that's that. Looking at last week's video, let's start at the top. Starting with Ricky John, Essential, high five. Hi Dom, still lurking. Always good to hear your thoughts on creativity, writing. I seem to struggle with getting most of the way into writing a track, only to find it sounds very similar to something I forgot I'd listened to a week or two ago, kind of like a shit remix. Then I just wind up mentally blocked from new ideas. I have no other questions, so any advice would be great. So, yeah, I think I'm fairly sure 99% of anyone watching this will have the same issue. I do it myself. And this is one of the reasons why I always suggest, when it comes to finding inspiration or getting motivated and you know, when you've got that mental block and you're just wanting an idea, I quite often suggest, you know, so for me, I watch a sci-fi movie or a film score or something like that. I'll watch something that's outside of my normal remit. You know, I might listen to some drum and bass or some I don't know, just something that isn't what I'm trying to write. And that's kind of one of the reasons for it. So it means that if you do find yourself writing something very similar, it's not ever going to be that similar. It's only ever going to be somewhat similar melodically or maybe in the bass line or something. And I like to get inspiration because, let's be honest, is there really that much difference between inspiration and theft? You know, I think inspiration is just a nice way of saying stealing. So when people say, oh, I wrote this track, it was inspired by, I don't know. So I think that's one of the key bits of advice. The other thing is I think this is one of those things where something else I've always suggested to people is to try and brush up on music theory, and I think that shows the importance of music theory because, for example, let's say you hear an amazing track and you love the bass line notation of it, and so you imitate that bass line and you develop a track on top of it and whatever, but you can't help but think this bass line is just blatant theft. And I'm saying this because this has happened to me before, where I then keep listening back to the track and I'm like, it does nothing, even though it's a completely different genre, it does nothing but remind me of the track that I was inspired by in creating that bass line in those 4 or 5 notes. And while legally speaking, those 4 or 5 notes probably aren't going to get you into any trouble, morally, I feel it's still just a bit uncomfortable for me. So this is where music theory comes into play, is so long as you know the key and the scale, you're kind of able to change it around, and you know, I think it makes it easier to sort of experiment with that bass line, just move some of the notes around so that they still have maybe the same feeling and the same vibe, but with different intervals, or maybe move the first and second intervals into the third and fourth position or whatever. So I think that's something that is quite important. And I know I've had a few rants before where I've sort of tried explaining how important music theory is, and I know I've had arguments with people where electronic music producers, and unfortunately people who claim to be teachers of music production, have said music theory isn't that important in electronic music, and I wholeheartedly disagree for that reason, basically, because if you didn't know music theory, you're just going in blind, and that simple thing of just moving a few notes within a bass line, knowing that if you shift it maybe a perfect fifth, you'll have the same, or maybe rather than going a perfect fifth down, you go a perfect fifth up, or I don't know, something along those lines, keeping that interval ratio, I suppose, or moving to a different interval. But knowing these means that you can change that bass line up within, a minute or two. Whereas if you have no concept of music theory, you might get there, but it might take you an hour, a day, a week to find those notes, because it's not intuitive to do that. So yeah, I don't know if any of that helps, but yeah, that's all I can think of. Don't think I commented since around Christmas, so Happy New Year to you all, and to you. Now I'm off to find that 2004 Sasha and Digweed mix. Editing to say, I can't wait to see how your label pans out. I'm sure I'll be locked in. Thank you very much. Cavalcade. Interesting and enjoyable AMA as always. Slow and essential. High five and high five. Can't wait to see and hear how the label develops. By the sound of it, I'll be buying every release. Are you planning to release albums as well as singles and EPs? I mean, potentially. I do think, however, that any record label of any size in this day, well, in any day and age, really, let's be honest, should have a budget behind it for things like marketing and promotion and whatever else. Without that, I don't think it's going to make the earth move. And if you're signing albums, I feel like albums are a very different product from the producer's perspective, the listener's perspective, the label's, everyone's perspective. An album is a very different thing. If I use my album as an example, the way I've approached it is different to anything I've ever approached before. It's a big body of work that has taken me, a year or so far. And it's not even finished. So, you need to kind of plan a campaign that can last that long beyond the release. I guess it depends on who's on board. If the label was up and running and, there was a team of us running it, I guess if a few people had experience of pushing albums, then maybe. I'm not against the idea. Well, I'm not against it at all. I'm quite keen for the idea, but I think it takes an extra bit for that. So I think albums wouldn't be in the running straight away. It would be mostly EPs, I feel. Singles, not so much, but maybe. I don't know. Honestly, don't know. I've not really thought about that too much, to be honest, because I feel like I think anyone who watches my channel enough will know that my sort of ethos when it comes to music is, if it's good music, it's good music. Simple as that. Gold Toast. Hi Dom, Essential, high five. Have you ever thought of doing a feedback video as well? Something like where we get to submit our tracks maybe twice a month or every month for a music feedback video. I think it would be very helpful for a lot of people, me included. Also interested in hearing other viewers' music. Cheers. This comes up somewhat regularly, and it's something I should really do something about. If only I had more time and energy. So first of all, no, I can't do videos on it because YouTube will shut it down, because there will be copyright claims, because even though the viewers' music I review in these videos would mostly be unsigned at that point, there's nothing to say that 2 weeks later, you then sign it to a label that then releases it and offers me a takedown notice. So I think it would be futile to do videos on uncopyrighted music or unreleased music, because eventually that music will come out and eventually it'll be signed and there's guaranteed to be takedown notices. However, I have thought about maybe doing it in the Facebook group and getting everyone to just drop a SoundCloud link or something. But again, it's kind of it then becomes a case of me finding enough time to be able to sit and listen. So, and then finally, the other thing is, if I'm completely selfish, what's in it for me? And I mean that with the greatest respect, but listening to unfinished music is probably not the most enjoyable part of my day. And I feel like it would also be quite difficult because there will be some tracks where I really don't have much to say, and somewhere I do have a lot to say. And so then I'm thinking, well, maybe I could do a Facebook thing where everyone drops their SoundCloud links and I limit it to like a 5-word review, a 5-word technical review on each track or something like that, which makes it a bit more fun and certainly much quicker. So I'm thinking I'll do something at some point. That it's going to happen, it has to. But yeah, it's just a bit tricky finding the right time and place and whatever else. So there we go. Yanis Longmelis, essential info as always. High five. Zombo, hi Dom, love your video as usual, good stuff. Do you plan on releasing sample packs for free or purchase on the label? I would love to have something like that. First of all, I don't think I would ever release sample packs for free. Maybe a sample of a sample pack, but I don't think samples should be free if they're royalty free. And every time I've seen people giving away free samples, they're usually crap. So I don't think I would do that. However, would I release sample packs at all on the label? No, I don't think so. I've done the sample pack label with Quantum Loops and I enjoyed that for what it was, but I don't think that it has a place in a record label. I think they should be two separate things, which is something I may consider in the future. But for the time being, I don't think I would even consider releasing sample packs, because I feel like the dream label that I've talked about for me would be, because the year is 2020. The whole concept of DJing and everything has changed, and the whole concept of listening to music has changed, and that's really what it would focus on. So I wouldn't want to be releasing Beatport top 10s or anything like that. So it wouldn't, in fact, I wouldn't care about Beatport at all. It wouldn't be for producers or DJs. It would be for people who want to sit down and listen to music, or stick on a pair of headphones or whatever, and in their daily commute or whatever, and just listen to some great production. They don't have to be a producer. So if I was giving out sample packs, I don't know if everyone listening to the label would give a shit, because they might be too, they'd be more of a consumer level customer, I guess. I think it's hard to say because we're talking about things that don't exist. But yeah, that's my view on it. Anyway, however, on that note, if anyone is looking for some free sample packs, then I think for $10, which is basically free, on my Patreon, there'll be a link below this video, then you get 4 sample packs, I think, which is probably worth best part of $100, and are no longer available anywhere else, so they are pretty exclusive. So please feel free to sign up to that. Nathan Zaskarinskis, essential, high five. So the K2 takes MIDI notes over both USB and MIDI. I found it strange that it doesn't have MIDI CC. I emailed Behringer about it and they confirmed it does not. So I'm assuming it would have cost Behringer more to include MIDI CC. Either way, it's still a good synth. Yeah, so MIDI CC, I'm assuming that when you say MIDI CC, you're talking about shifting parameters. So, for example, the frequency cutoff or the resonance or something. You want to be able to automate that, I'm guessing. Or do you mean CC as in on-off? I don't think you'd mean that on a K2, which is the MS-20, isn't it? Yeah, so I'm guessing you mean automation of parameters. Yeah, so to build a synth that has the ability to automate parameters via USB, you would have to get very particular kinds of potentiometers. I don't know the price of the K2, but having seen the price of a lot of their other stuff, I would say you could do it for that price, but I can definitely understand why they wouldn't, because it does, I would imagine they're probably shaving the profit margins wherever they can, and rightly so, to be honest, because the prices of these things are astounding. They're an absolute bargain from what I can see. And, as you say, it's either way still a good synth. So, yeah, I can understand Behringer's choice in doing that. I can understand your frustration as well, but the one thing I will say is something I avoid doing is automating parameters on hardware synth myself, because I actually find it much more fun if I decide, right, over here in this breakdown, I want the filter cutoff to start opening up or whatever. It's way more enjoyable for me to sort of just do it by hand, just hit the record button and do it by hand, because when you want to open that filter and then close it at the drop, let's say, it's just so much more natural to do it by hand and by ear, because we know when we want it to close. And actually you'll find if you're opening the filter towards a big build up and then you're dropping it closed at the drop, you'll actually find when you're doing it by hand, you actually close the filter a little bit before you would have in any other instance if you were doing it manually. If you're doing it manually, you kind of draw the envelope lines going from all the way to the very last moment, and then it drops down on beat 1 of the drop. Whereas actually if you're doing it by hand, you'll notice if you just close your eyes and don't even look at what you're doing and just do it by hand, just do it completely by feeling, you'll actually start twisting. It's the momentum of the motion of moving that filter. You'll actually find you start turning that dial quite a bit before you would if you were manually drawing it in by computer. And actually when you listen back to that, and by all means try this if any of you have a synth that's both MIDI CC and hardware, do one take by hand and just do it completely by feeling of opening up the filter and then dropping it closed at the drop, and then do one manually drawing it in as you normally would. And for me personally, the timing is completely different, and the timing of doing it manually is just so much more human and it's more pleasurable to listen to be honest. I find it just feels more natural. Yeah, and there's a huge difference. So I would say, in answer to your MIDI CC, maybe it's a good thing that it doesn't have MIDI CC, because it forces us to make more natural decisions. So there we go. There's a read more. No questions for you, but something will crop up during NAMM. I've already saw that MIDI 2.0 is a thing now. Okay, I didn't know they'd done that, but I may look into that, or someone tell me more if you're a geek, because a good friend of mine was one of the guys behind the papers of sorting out the global protocols for MIDI 2.0. So that's cool if that's now a thing. Edit. I saw that Korg are remaking the MS-20 again, just full size this time, and wanted to ask you what your thoughts are on all the remakes and clones of old synths. Do you think brands are just doing it to cash in on nostalgia, or is there a genuine need for these? Okay, so yeah, it's definite a lot of nostalgia. It's also, I think, for the last, if you look at an original 303, I remember I borrowed one, well over 20 years ago from a friend, and I remember seeing it going, oh great, 303, can I borrow it to make a track? So he lent it to me, and I remember him saying something really flippant, like it was like £100 or something. It was nothing. It was not. It wasn't a valuable synth back then. Now you look on eBay for an original 303 and they're thousands of pounds. So it kind of makes sense that these companies are going to start making clones, and good clones at that, because there's a lot of money in it. And why not, So I think a lot of it is nostalgia. Is there a genuine need for them? Well, let's be honest. Is there a genuine need for any of the crap that we own? I mean, look around me. Is there a genuine need for any of these things? No. It's just boys and toys, which is a very sexist thing to say. You know what I mean? It's just people and toys. But yeah, the MS-20, I have seen that as well. And yeah, I do get very envious looking at it. It looks awesome. They've also done the ARP 2600, which I'm more excited about. These things are going to be crazy expensive. I've not seen the price, but I would say that the ARP 2600 is probably one of those bits of kit that I'm going to guess it's going to be £3,000 or £4,000 at least, but it's probably worth every penny if it's as good as the original, because the original was so bad it was good in that it wasn't very stable. The pitch drifted badly, but all of these things added, all of these little quirks that they had added up to create the character of the 2600, which is what we all know and love. So is there a genuine need for these things? I think it's hard to say there's a genuine need for half the things in our life. So but if you think there is, then yes, there is a genuine need for these things. So it's 50-50, I suppose. But also, I've always said, I'm a big advocate for hardware in general, because I like the hands-on, tangible stuff. So it feels better. So yeah, there's that, I suppose. And I think it also changes your mindset when you're making music using hardware versus making music just staring at a computer screen. I feel like I'm more involved with my music when I'm using hardware and turning dials with my hands and setting things up, plugging things in, unplugging things, and generally getting frustrated. I feel like there's more blood, sweat and tears in a project then. And for me, maybe it's an age thing, I don't know, but I feel like there's more value in the art then, which again, I digress, but talking about if I was to start a record label in 2020, that's the angle I would want, is the blood, sweat and tears. It would be for the love of the art, not something that's just easily thrown together. So there we go. And finally, St. Nicholas Essential High Five. Bit of a short one this week. So please do keep the questions coming. Where are we? 25 minutes. Not too bad. Thank you very much for listening, watching, whatever it is you do. If it's Friday for you, then I hope you have a good weekend. If it's not Friday, then I hope you had a good weekend. Either way, I will see you the same time next week. But to prove that you've made it this far into the video, I'm going to say comment the word McGregor, because it is McGregor versus Cowboy this weekend, and I am very much hyped for the fight. So yeah, have a good weekend. I'll see you this time next week. Cheers.